Welcome to ServiceSharp. This is a podcast all about ServiceNow. We'll be talking strategy, architecture, technology, and everything ServiceNow. This podcast is not affiliated with ServiceNow. The opinions expressed are our own. We're just people that are very passionate about the platform. Join us for every episode.
All right, welcome back. This is Jason Gibson with ServiceSharp. I have Randy Haas, Brent Peters, and Kathy Sullivan on the phone today. We're all working remotely from our houses, so if you hear some sort of child noise in the background or something going on, we apologize. But today we're going to be talking about Cmdb. We're going to go a little deeper than the last time. We're actually going to be going into a little bit into the structure of it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent to kind of do a little bit of a walkthrough.
Okay. We were going to start out by, just kind of talking about the structure, the tables, that kind of stuff. So Cmdb consists of, out of the box at least, 790 tables. Kind of overwhelming, but you have your configuration item, and then everything kind of goes off of that. And each class or subclass, I can't think of a better word, has their own table, and some of those extend off of other tables and so on. So they just keep extending and everything. So your configuration item is going to be the base, and then one of the bases, and then it goes from there, and each table has its own columns or own fields, but like Windows Server, so I'll pick on that. So on Windows Server, you have this schema that shows up. So you have your base configuration item, then you have your configuration item, then that's part of then you have hardware, then you have the computer, server, and the Windows Server. So these are all the tables that go together to consist of a Windows Server.
And they're in the Cmdb. They're all related together, right? So you have your CI, which is the configuration item. You've got, and it kind of, if you would, goes in a there are things that attach to it, or tables that are associated with it, I guess is the best way to put it, that kind of walk down into more specific information about that configuration item, right?
Right. So your base, you have your base item, and then you have your configuration item, and all those are fields that are common across all of your CIs. And then you have hardware items. So all the hardware items have columns or fields, however you want to look at it, that are related to every hardware. So the further down the chain you get with like Windows Server and Server, the more specific you get to that type of device. And the closer you get back down to the base configuration item, the broader it gets, because those are saving across all of your classes. So you might have on one table you might have serial number, and that comes across all of them. But on like Windows Server, you have patching level, because not everything underneath there needs a Windows patching level or something like that. So you could have specific fields this way that are to a specific type of device that you want or class. So.
Okay. All right. And everything stems from the Cmdb table. Now, the Cmdb table is that base table, is that first one there.
Yes.
So everything starts there. And would you say that each of these are classes? So you have your base configuration, your configuration items, and then your classes?
I would, I'm trying to think that one out, but for the most part, yes. Yep, your classes are going to be off of that. Some classes are more generic than others, but yeah, we'll go.
Okay.
Yep. So this is just looking at the schema. Over here we were looking at the tables, so you'll have all your tables and everything. So like I said, there's a bunch of them, and they also extend off of other tables, so you can see those extensions, that kind of stuff. There is also in ServiceNow, you would go to configuration, and you have all your configuration setup and stuff here. And then down below you have your classes. So you have your applications, your servers, your computers, your clusters, all that kind of stuff. So these are all your out-of-the-box classes. I am using a personal dev, so this is an out-of-the-box setup. So it just gets all that information and can be stored in these tables. One way to kind of look at how these things are kind of set up is the CI class manager. And from here you can see the hierarchy. So you would see all kinds of different configuration items and different types and all. So if we go down here and we go to hardware, because we knew Windows Server was under hardware, then we can go to computer, server, and then there's Windows Server down here. I'm picking on those because I'm more familiar with that stuff. So from here you can see your basic info. What is the display name? I would recommend, and I recommend this all the time, stay out of the box with this kind of stuff, but there you could change it. Please don't. You can do your description, so you could put a more descriptive description in there, that kind of stuff. Your attributes are going to be your fields. So these are the attributes to Windows servers.
And don't go crazy with this. Try and stay, again, as close to out of the box as possible. I see too many people start adding way too many without the thought of what are we going to do with this information. So if you're going to be adding those attributes, really think about what you're going to track and why you need that in there. Because if you don't need it in there, don't put it in there.
Right. Like we said in the last one.
Yeah.
You're about to cover it. Never mind.
So derived is things, all is going to be, you know, all your fields. Derived is what's derived out of the system. There are 106. And so they either come from the Windows server or the computer or the server table or the hardware or so on. So all those are in there. Before you, like Jason was saying, before you add any, make sure you don't already have it in there. It could be that it's just not showing in the form. So go look for that. Make sure stuff's in there. I mean, they have a lot of, almost anything that you'd want to have pretty much out of the box for the most part. And then you can always add more. But, you know, like he said, you have that. Identification rules are a little bit different, but pretty much you can do your identification rules, or you can do the lookup, that kind of stuff in here. So this is kind of the priority of that stuff.
So how would you use identification rules and reconciliation
I was hoping you weren't really.
rules?
I'm not real familiar with these, so if somebody else knows.
Now I know the
okay, I see what it is. This is what you're going to go off of to get your unique systems. So if you're pulling data in, or you're pulling discovery, most likely it's going to be discovery or something like that. These are the fields or the attributes that it's going to go off of to make sure that they are unique and that you're not going to have duplicates.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
It helps kind of when you're like the normalization rules kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really broad though.
It is really broad, but it does help when looking at duplicate remediation.
Yes, it does. Where it does not help is if you have two different systems coming in, like Discovery and an outside source, and Discovery sees it as a Windows server, and your outside source just sees it as a wrong server, like Linux or something, and you try to do that, it's gonna have some issues with that stuff. But that's a different topic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have your suggested relationships. These relationships are out of the box A lot of them are because of how discovery is going to work, that kind of stuff. But it's kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in a little bit. But like a Windows server is going to have an IP connection. It's going to depend on things. It's going to have possibly be a cluster. You can relate it to business services, racks, circuits, that kind of stuff. So these are the suggested relationships. As in most places, you have the option of adding new relationships. If you have a relationship that's not one of these out of the box, you can always add one in there.
I will say that it is really important to try and keep these relationships clean and to try and keep these relationships to the recommended type of relationships for the class. Yes. Because if not, what you end up doing is having an extremely confusing map of your systems. We have seen customers come in and do runs on every single relationship. Well, that really doesn't tell you anything about your systems if everything is runs on. You have to have runs on, depends on. You have to have different relationships and stay with the ones that are recommended for each one of the classes, because they really are well thought out and they do make good sense.
Right. And I personally can't think of anywhere I've had to add any because they've always had them in there. But right. You could do it. I would recommend trying to stay, like you said, out of the box. I would also, like you were saying, recommend don't use the same one for every single thing. Use them for what they really are for, not, everything runs on this server when it's really, the server, the rack doesn't run on the server. The rack is installed, or the server's installed on the rack. That kind of stuff. So,
right.
Okay. This is also, and we can go into Cmdb health a lot later.
Because this is a lot to it. Yeah.
But this is also where you can set up, your completeness. What defines a complete Windows server in your instance? Compliance. So you can say if this isn't updated or this doesn't meet this criteria, you can make it not compliant. The correctness, what has to be filled out, and everything. What makes it an orphan rule? That kind of stuff. And then your health inclusion rules, this is where you would add those also. In fact, you would want it to do whichever ones you have set up. Also from this view, was there anything else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, on the compliance, when you set those rules up and something falls out of compliance, what does that do?
What that will do is, in theory, I guess you could set up notifications, that kind of stuff, but there's a Cmdb view that the config managers, the Cmdb managers can look at and see the compliancy. They can see the correctness. It also runs a duplication health, so it come up and tell you, hey, you have 23 Windows Server duplicates, and you can go reconcile those, that kind of stuff.
It's really a great dashboard to have if you're on that portion of it. Kathy, did you get a chance to use the Cmdb dashboard at all?
Yeah, I did, but it was whenever it was first brought into ServiceNow pretty early on, and this type of configuration was a lot more complicated, I guess, than it used to be, or than it is here. I think that the way that this is done now, it's easier to visualize what it is that your different parameters are for how you want to define all of your health settings. So I haven't used it in this format. It was all, we kind of had to define it and then have it and then get it configured, and it just sometimes whenever you just couldn't see it like this, it was a lot harder to know what you were getting right.
Yeah, and it's a really hard dashboard to set up, honestly, compared to some of the other dashboards. There is some dependencies you have to turn on, and there's some we could do an entire hour of how do you turn on and configure your dashboard. So it is not about turning the plugin on and just, hey, you got it. You have to configure the reports. You have to set up some basic rules to make the decisions of what those things are. But overall, I think it's, especially in the New York version, it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of that configuration is necessary because each organization is going to have their own unique set of values that they need to define to what do they think is important. You got your base stuff, but beyond that, what do you think makes a CI complete?
Right. Because some people might think, okay, I have to have the memory on the server has to be a certain value, and if it changes one way or the other, I need to know. Or if the IP ever changes, I need to know that. Some people might have DHCP set up for their server, so they don't care, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you have to kind of take it into account how your CMDB needs to be structured or what's required and when.
Yeah. And your hardware people may want something different than, say, your change managers.
Yep.
From what it is that they think needs to be in a configuration item, if that drives anything within change, and it probably does.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So there's discussions that go along with configuring that.
Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Yeah, lots.
And also from here, you can click on the CI list, and it'll show you your current Windows servers and all that stuff. So here's all my demo records. So that's kind of the CI class manager in a nutshell. Like I said earlier, you can drill down to any of the classes that are out there and start looking at the same stuff. But that's just kind of an overview of how the Windows Server one looks like. Any comments, questions, or anything? I think Jason's muted.
He is muted.
Wow.
There we go.
let me start again. No, I gotta tell you, it is very interesting the fact that you can go in here, you can look at the relationship, you can look at the attributes, but when you're setting up a CMDB new, and you're just starting, and you don't know what is what, and you're just starting to figure it out, this is a great place to go to see what out of the box looks like. And
right. So you can see what fields, what is the relationships are, and all that kind of stuff. Yes, it is a very good place to start.
Right, and it helps you also know now who do I go talk to. So it's the Windows Server, so I'm going to have to go talk to the team that supports the Windows servers. But here is my basic structure. I know what should be there. Now I'm going to go talk to them, tell them what that the capability is, what's there, and hopefully not have them go crazy, but ask their input from that point on. And again, not doing all of the things that they say necessarily, or not all the things that they want, but at least having those conversations are great.
Keep it simple to start out with. Just because the Windows Server has 106 fields available doesn't mean you use them all. Use what you need, and you can always expand from there, but there's no reason to track things that are never going to be used, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I agree.
And even if you can, and a lot of stuff, when you start doing integrations, you're going to get stuff that just comes in. Don't be afraid to omit it if it's not valuable to you. But if it is valuable to you, that you can find a way to get the data. Everything in here is pretty reasonable. There's nothing that really goes outside the norm. And if you're trying to do things like bringing in external or additional classes, go look on ServiceNow's site, because there are extended tables that you can load. There is extended tables that you can load the plugins for things like conference room equipment and other extended tables. So go look there first before you start creating your own classes.
Yep.
All right. So real quick, let's take a quick break. I really have no idea how long we've been going on, but we need to hear from our sponsor at some point. So now is as good a time as any. When we come back, we will continue to talk about Cmdb and the table structure and how we manage our classes, and maybe talk a little bit about building that out or adding classes as we need to. So hang on just a minute. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back. This is Jason Gibson, Randy Haas, Brent Peters, and Kathy Sullivan. We are all here talking about Cmdb, and we are really glad to have everybody here with us. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, now that we've gotten kind of the basic understanding of how the CMD is put together, what have you guys seen in practice? What are people asking to add? Are they asking for additional classes? What are you seeing the most benefit out of the CMDB as far as that's concerned, and what are people really asking for?
Service mapping depends on your level. I think that it's really good for any operations. They really want to see those relationships, which Discovery does really well. If you're using Discovery, other tools, if you can import it in from other discovery options or discovering type tools, network scanning tools, I guess I should use that term, then it's really great to have that kind of information, because I don't know, every time I've worked in IT before ServiceNow, there's always like this mystery of, well, what is that server connected to? and then whenever you go make a change, nobody really knows what your impact is. And then suddenly your entire network's down, and and nobody can do anything, and you just have a complete waste of a day because your entire business has been impacted by this pretty critical change, and nobody really knew what was there. So I really think that the best thing that the CMDB really has to offer is those relationships, and understanding those relationships is really important, because sometimes it might get a little confusing as to how ServiceNow tends to word things. It looks like you were saying earlier, people want to build out the same relationships, and they use runs on over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, that's cool, but that doesn't really tell you the truth about what it really looks like. And so I think that having the understanding of the relationships and really getting people around it is the most beneficial thing that you can get out of the CMDB.
Now, do you think that the business side leadership and IT leadership get equally as much benefit out of the service mapping?
I think that I think they want to believe that they do.
Okay.
I think if you do it right, they can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really challenging though, because the biggest part that I've always seen people struggle with is, well, the first thing you have to do whenever you start doing service mapping is what? Define a service.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, what do you want your services to be? Well, what does that mean? And you start going down this rabbit hole of trying to, and then they make it too granular. It's like, all right, and at least in my exposure to service mapping, one of the biggest things they say is pick your top 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What are your top 10? And then whenever you get those built out, look at your data. Can you get more granular? Do you want to get more granular? What else do you want to add? And then take it in baby steps. You can't drink in one sitting. And that's exactly what you'll do if you try to take on all of discovery and all of service mapping and all of configuration management in one sitting.
Yeah, you can't. It's a water hose, right? Or a fire hose.
Yeah.
you're gonna drown.
Yeah, I've always heard you can't boil the ocean. So
yeah, I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you take it in baby steps and you really kind of try to put a lot of thought into your service mapping and really bring in a team that understands it, that can help your team to better understand it, then those are the types of things that there are a lot of people that, bring other people in to help us with service mapping. What do we need to do? And then they realize that it's not as, discovery does a lot, but it can't do everything for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because discovery can't tell you what's important to you.
Yeah, right. Well, and you know how many times that I have gone to an organization and said, okay, you need service mapping there. We really do. But that is so much work.
It is.
And then we have to talk to people. And
IT, we don't talk.
That's right.
It's like, whoa, yeah, but you get great business insight. They're like, yeah, but is it really worth it? I mean, we have to actually get with our leadership and get decisions made. And it really is that kind of thing, and it's tough.
It is. It is.
Right.
It is tough.
And you pointed out discovery. Discovery is only going to figure out your physical and some virtual relationships and CIs. Your services and stuff like that, your business is going to have to define those for you.
Yeah, but even whenever you're, picking your entry points and then letting it do its thing, it's going to go out there and it's going to find everything, right? Just like discovery does. And it's going to pull in all of those relationships into your map. You have to go out there and be like, okay, yeah, but that might be connected to that, but we don't really need to see it in this service map.
Right.
And those are things that you have to get people like, and I know that that's a 4-letter word in IT. Is like, oh my God, I have to talk to people. But you have to get people that know the networks and understand their systems to be able to give input on that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I think it's extremely valuable. I think it is extremely worth every bit of effort that you put into it for just the fact that you get great oversight. What do you guys think? Do you think it's worth the effort to go ahead and have those conversations and do the whole service mapping project?
I believe it is, but we're all preaching to the choir right now.
Right. Yeah.
I think we all believe that. I can't speak for everybody. I just think that though.
I mean, it just depends. Do you want to get value out of your investment, or
you want to get more value? You can still
do you want to get
value out. Just you want to get more value. Yeah.
I think in our last session, somebody said that ServiceNow is the poster child for you got to spend money to make money. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what service mapping really says to me. I mean, your return on investment for how much time it takes to be able to get it right it's not a small number. And the number of people that have to be involved and the duration of the project, it would be very intensive. Is it worth it? I mean, I think so. I think that that's something that most businesses can't say that they have, is an understanding of how technology supports the business. And I think that with what service mapping helps IT do is it helps the business to realize IT is not that cost center. IT is what supports all of this. And without tech, we don't have any of it.
But isn't that one thing that our leadership is supposed to be doing all the time? We're supposed to be going to the business and saying, here's here's what we have to offer you, and this is how we're supporting you. I mean, it's the responsibility of IT to take that to the business side and to the leadership and say, okay, so this is how we're supporting you.
I agree. I agree, and it's and service mapping helps with those types of things, because visualizations are great because you could say it all day, but what service mapping does is shows it.
Right.
And it puts data behind it, and it makes, it shows it to somebody and says, this is how we're providing value.
And keep this in mind.
Bridge that gap.
Here's what else.
Tech mumbo jumbo and business expectations.
Yeah.
So I think it's very valuable ammo to give to your leadership.
Yeah.
But be careful, because it shows everything. It's going to show how you're supporting it, but it's also going to show if there are 47. I mean, if it's mapped out correctly, it's also going to show the negative, the negative that you have too, and areas to improve and things to that effect. But that's good too, because as a leader, you need to know what areas you need to improve in.
Sure.
And if you don't know that, you can't make the improvement. My wife always gets onto me sometimes because I'll get a steak and it won't be cooked right, and I send it back, or I'll have something, bad, and I tell the manager. But I don't ever tell the manager in malice, and I'm never rude about it. I just simply want them to know, because I feel like if leadership doesn't know what's going on, they can't fix it. And it's no different with this. If the leadership doesn't know where it needs to adjust, it can't adjust. And it betters the entire organization. And if you better the entire organization, you make that job that person's worried about more stable. And you can hire more. You can grow. I mean, there's so many benefits to having that stability that it outweighs any temporary discomfort for saying that we're lacking in this one area.
Well, I think just to follow up on that, people need to get out of the mindset of, I only want to see good news, because the best way to improve your service is to find out faster what's going wrong.
Right.
And the faster you can find out what's going wrong, and the faster you can measure what your changes are doing to improve that situation, the better and better you get. It's like if you try to sharpen a knife, you have to take a layer of off every time you move the stone across the metal. And if you don't, then it's never going to get sharp. It's always going to be dull. And that's the same thing with your IT organization. If everybody sticks their head in the sand and pretends like there's no problems when it's unrealistic whatsoever for there not to be any problems, then nothing ever gets better. Things continue to get worse. And so it's best to confront issues head on. It's best to go looking for them, to be honest.
Exactly. But it's also very important how you sharpen the knife. If you put the knife directly in a 90-degree angle and run it across the stone, you're not sharpening the stone. You're not sharpening the knife. You're ruining the knife. So coming in with a heavy hand, or how you go about sharpening that stone or refining your organization is as important as knowing where your gaps are. So it's knowing where your gaps are and moving it in the correct direction. And if you need help with this, I know these guys, they sponsor this podcast. They can help you.
Yep.
So sorry, I had to get it.
The more that you can identify that kind of stuff, and the faster you can identify that kind of stuff, the quicker you can fix it. A lot of times down the road, you can start catching that stuff before the customers even notice anything.
Yeah,
exactly.
And a CMDB and the relationships and all that stuff just helps you identify that stuff a lot quicker.
I mean, if you're going to move away from being a reactive organization, unless you only have 2 computers in your organization, I think you pretty much have to invest in doing some sort of CMDB.
Well, and I got to tell you, one of my favorite sayings, I heard that from a leadership coach, that simply do more of the important and less of the urgent. We're trying to move away from everything being on the urgent side and doing more of the important. Well, the important stuff are identifying these areas and these gaps and doing the service mapping and all those are important things to be able to manage your IT organization better. So building these things out and getting them right is the important stuff. Yes, you're going to have urgent stuff, but the more of the important stuff you do, the less of the urgent stuff you're going to have. So make time for the important stuff and make it a priority, or all you're going to be doing is fighting fires.
Yeah, we're not firefighters.
No. I'm not built for it.
And fighting fires all the time is if that's a great way to burn out your staff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Great way to burn out your staff, burn up your goodwill, reduce your budget, get laid off.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you had one takeaway from this podcast, and I'm going to start with you, Kathy, one takeaway from this podcast, what would it be? What do you want people to take away from this?
I want people to I want people to realize that building out a CMDB requires a plan. That it requires a lot of time commitment. That it's not something that you just want to go tell Discovery and give, your AD credentials to and then let it go do its thing without really understanding what it's doing and without really knowing what it is that you're going to get. At least there's a lot of planning that has to go into building a quality CMDB, and I think we hit on that a lot the last time. Mm-hmm. And all of these classes, ServiceNow out of the box has 790 classes. Well, every single new release of ServiceNow, which in case you didn't know, they come out with 2 of every year, usually has more CI classes with every release that they come out with. So pretty soon in the next couple of years, we're probably going to have up to 1,000. And that's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to building a really good CMDB, and there's a lot of options out there. And before you start customizing everything, try to, send people to a class or have them look on the Now Learning site to try to do some things, get some training behind them so that whenever you go in to build this, you can come in with a plan. I guess that's the project manager in me that's like, we need to really kind of know what we're getting into so that we don't have to come back. And like a lot of people end up doing in a few years, they're like, this is completely useless. I can't use this at all. And then they end up deleting it and starting over.
Exactly.
I think he muted himself again.
He did.
Yeah, I did. I actually was trying to tell my daughter was actually coming up to try and get in the video. So.
The one thing I would agree. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Kathy said, but I'm also planning is key to this. I want people to know that you have to plan all of this out before you start building things and just throwing things in there, like she said. The best implementations I've seen is, they had workshops up front to get everybody to buy in and say, yes, this is what we need to have. No, we don't need that, or let them bicker back and forth on what needs to be stored in where and that kind of stuff, and get that stuff all planned out and then build it and start putting things in. I have been in an implementation where they just turned on Discovery and filled up the database. It's not good.
Yeah. It's
always a fun one, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
It's like, now what, right? Now what? What do we do with all of this junk, right? So yeah.
I would echo everything that Brent and Kathy said. That it's so there's a lot of power, there's a lot of benefit to be derived from doing the project, but it's definitely worth being honest with yourself and saying, okay, if I don't understand really what the CMDB is, bring someone in that does, and at least for the planning process. They don't have to do the implementation necessarily, but helping set all those things out, that this is what needs to be in, and this is you don't need this, because what we talked about earlier is, you don't need every single field, filled out. You don't need all 600 attributes filled out to get a lot of power and a lot of benefit out of things. So, take the time to do it right, and be honest with yourself about what your capabilities are with doing it.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
something else to point out to people whenever you're building it is every attribute you put on a class is something that has to be audited and looked at every so often to make sure that it's been updated, and it is things that you have to update. Some things you cannot some custom fields that people are going to want in there, you cannot update automatically through a scan or that kind of stuff. So someone will have to touch it. So that is something to keep in mind.
My recommendation, I hate to say this, it's 700 different tables, more than 700 different tables, almost 800. And that doesn't include if you add the packs that extend it.
Yep.
Do not get yourself in the position to where you are manually updating a bunch of stuff in the Cmdb, because I promise you, you will not do it. You got to get that data from somewhere, whether it's Discovery, SCCM, Jamf, whether it's you've got SolarWinds. There's 1,000 different integrations that can be done to find that information. So go find that information, and please do not make it to where you have to manually update 20 or 30 or 40% of your Cmdb, and all of a sudden 6 months from now it's going to not be useful to you.
Right.
I think that going back to the planning, you not only need to plan on this is what it needs to look like to begin with, but from the very beginning you need to plan for the maintenance of the Cmdb, because it is a living thing. It's not a set it and forget it.
Yes, as soon as
good
that data's in there,
processes,
you need to maintain it. One other thing that I would recommend that I've seen is, and Kathy kind of hinted on this earlier, is let's say there's 790 classes right now in the system, and you have this weird class that just came up, and you're like, okay, I can put it in there and I can start doing this. Research your updates first before you start adding things. Because if you add, I don't know, off the top of my head, let's say thin clients. You add a table to thin clients. Oh, the next upgrade, put it in there. Now you have 2 tables for thin clients.
Yeah.
So kind of research that kind of stuff and before you do it, and say, hey, we can put this off until the next upgrade, which is in 2 months, and then we'll start doing that. So have some discussions about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to mention that earlier, and in one of the things that was brought up whenever you were going through the class manager and potentially adding new things, and Jason and Randy kind of hit on this some too, is that whenever you even come close to thinking about adding something to a table that already has almost 200 attributes to it, really, really look, is this really that important? Is it really something that doesn't already fit somewhere else? And how are we going to maintain it? Because if you're using Discovery, unless you're going to customize that too, Discovery is built to populate the fields that are out of the box, right?
Yep.
And not necessarily all of them, but the ones that it can, and build those relationships out of the box. It's a very robust tool, and a lot of times we as organizations don't want to adapt to the tools that we buy, and you go spend a whole lot of money on a tool like ServiceNow, and then you want to build it to work for you, and then you end up putting yourself in a situation that it's really difficult to do upgrades. And the Cmdb is a very crucial part to this tool. Customizing it can be debilitating long term if it's overly customized.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt.
And I've always said, it goes back to what we keep harping on, is you got to have your process and everything, and working and defined and all that. It doesn't matter if it's Cmdb or if it's incident or problem or change or anything like that. The tool is there to to collect the data and to give that data for reporting and audits and that kind of stuff. It's not going to fix your process if you have a broken process.
That's right.
No tool can fix the broken process. It's going to stay broken.
Yeah, you just get broken things faster.
Yes.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then you break a tool because you're trying to make it work with a broken process.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that goes with all of them, but CMDB is a very important one to keep that in mind.
For sure.
I irritate many managers by saying if you can't do it on paper, you're not going to be able to automate it. And
Right. Well, how many times have we just said, "Hey guys, would you just define this, please?"
oh yeah,
Because I can't script this if you can't define it. I mean, you can't even tell me what it is. So how can I help you?
If you can't
need requirements.
If you can't define it, I'll define it for you.
That's right.
They usually don't like that.
No.
Doesn't go over well.
What do you mean you wanted 16 fields? I gave you 3 that were out of the box.
That's right.
The best one is whenever they want 16 conditions off of one
Oh my goodness.
step in the process.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a few of
But
those.
if it's this and this and this, and I need it to do this. But if it's this, this, and that, then I need to.
Yeah.
Also, and if Jason's on vacation, I need it to go to these other 3 people.
Oh,
How do I know Jason's on vacation?
Right.
so basically that's our life. It's almost like every implementation we've ever been in, right? That's
It's kind of depressing to think about.
But the nice thing is most of the time people understand why you say that is not recommended and decide that they'll take your recommendation. If you don't work directly for them, now if you work directly for them, that may be a different story. But if you come in as a consultant, they tend to listen a little better. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know.
Only maybe to your face.
Maybe that's true. That's true. Yeah. All right, guys, you know how much I appreciate you guys coming on here and doing this with me. And I think that we've got a lot of information here that is helpful to people that are starting down the process to get this started. Kathy, it has been a pleasure to have you on here. We want you to be on here as much as you possibly can.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.
No problem.
Very
Brent,
passionate
Randy,
about
of course. Yeah, right, yeah.
Join the club. Well, I guess I'm just
exactly.
passionate about ServiceNow, so in general.
Yeah, I think we all have our passion for ServiceNow, and we have the people that are listening to us. They also have a passion for ServiceNow. So thank you guys, and thank you to the listeners. If you need anything or have any questions, we're here to help you. So send us a message, LinkedIn. Matter of fact, if you want to go to the Sharpstone page there, I know you had that up, Brent. You can always go to the website and look at the podcast there. This particular one will be on YouTube and pretty much anywhere you get a podcast. So feel free to go out there and watch it and take a look at it. If you're listening via audio. And again, send us a message if you need something. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Bye.
We want to thank our flagship sponsor for this show, the Sharpstone Group, LLC. Sharpstone is your source for all of your ServiceNow needs. Implementation, development, administration, strategy, and architecture. Contact the Sharpstone Group today at info@sharpstonegroup.com or 405-594-0100. We'd love to answer your questions or have you on the show. Contact us at ServiceSharp@sharpstonegroup.com or find our LinkedIn info in the notes. Additional sponsorship opportunities are available.